Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
So many people said, what? Like that changes everything for me too. And so that's when I realized, oh, this is that communication piece that's missing between naturally organized people and people who struggle.
This is how you know it's going to be a good one. Those days when we try to get on in the studio and record for you and technology fights us tooth and nail. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. And when we dreamed up this little baby a whole bunch of seasons ago, it was so we could come alongside you and help give you all kinds of insight, wisdom, inspiration, laughs, heartfelt moments for the life that you're living. And my guest today, well, let me just tell you, we've been a troubleshooting. She has hung in there, and I am so excited for our conversation because it is something that anytime I get a new tool, I am super excited to learn about it. Welcome, Dana K. White, to the podcast. Dana, thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me on and being patient and letting me do this on my phone when my computer decided to be very rude this morning. And yeah,
she's just giving herself a reset. Maybe she's a little perimenopausal. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's
sure,
fine.
Sure.
We're among friends here. Well, Dana, tell the listener where you live, what you're known for, because I know I'm going to have some listeners who are like, I can't wait to hear Dana. I will follow her stuff all the time. But tell the listener who doesn't know you, what you do, where you're from, all the things.
Well, I live near Dallas, Texas, and I am a mom of 3 college students at the moment. And I teach decluttering for a living. So I'm an author, and the literal last thing I ever thought I would write about would be anything to do with home management, decluttering, and yet that is exactly where God put me.
Yeah. I love hearing from people because I have those people in my life who truly, they came with that chip, right, Dana? Like they came with the thing where they can just look at a space and immediately know, and their houses have always been clean. And when they would come over to my barn, they'd be like, what is your problem? But I love talking to people who go, this is something I had to acquire, something I had to learn, something I had to work at. And you've called yourself a former slob, that it really was something that you had to work on. So give me that backstory, because I always find it fascinating to hear how somebody then moves into a place where they are known for their organizational skills, but it's something they had to really develop.
So I wanted to be a writer. I have an artistic, creative personality. I was a theater arts teacher before I had kids. And I had thought that's what I want to do someday. I have no idea how to be a writer. I got to figure this out. This is back in, the early 2000s when my kids were little. And I discovered blogs and went, well, I should do that. Right. That was in 2008. And I thought, I need to get my house under control first, because my house had been the thing that was my secret. Like, I didn't just, oh, this is harder than I thought. No, I mean, it was like bewildering to me and didn't make any sense to me. And I felt like there's something actually wrong with me, because I can be successful in other things, but for some reason, I cannot figure this out. And so I thought, I got to do that first, because I know my personality. I'll throw myself into this new writing thing and it will just be one more thing to take my focus away from my home. And I've got to figure out how to get my house under control. And so I tried now with this new motivation of this thing I want to do that my house is holding me back. I still couldn't do it. And so I was actually in a moment of prayer of frustration that I said, my second kid out of 3 was going to kindergarten the next day. I was only going to have 1 kid at home. And I was like, this is the time. Like, it makes sense. I could put her down for a nap and write. And I was so frustrated because I was like, God, why have you not cured me when I have asked you to cure me of this problem? Because it's keeping me from doing the thing that I really feel like I'm called by God to do, to write. I don't say this lightly. I don't say it often, but like God was just like, he just said, write about that. And so that was actually a really good idea, God. Okay. But I started the next day anonymously, thinking it was a temporary practice blog. I was going to get my house under control, and it would be an opportunity to learn about blogging to hopefully keep myself focused on my home. And it's now 17 years later, and I am still writing about this because I realized several things. First of all, I realized that this is part of how my brain works. The naturally organized people are usually the ones writing about this stuff. Their brains work very differently from mine. I also realized that I was not the only one. I truly thought that I was the only one who struggled the way that I did, which was the reason why it never occurred to me that this would be the thing that God would have me to write about, because I thought, this is just me. I got to get this figured out so I can write about other things I'm good at, right? Over time, I realized that what I provide is the missing piece for the people like me of, okay, great. How do I go though from this point that naturally organized people can't even imagine? And the way that I think is so different from the way of a naturally organized person, that's where I come in, is like the translator of basic concepts that are required if you want your house to be under control, but they are just completely not natural to me. And the naturally organized person doesn't usually understand how to communicate those things to someone like me.
Right.
So, yeah.
I just love that, because I do think there's something so powerful in the ability to break it down and see what may seem so obvious to others. But depending on the way that your brain is organized and the way that you handle things, it's not going to be as obvious to you. I've laughed. I was just talking to one of my adult kids about this recently. God always seems to put me, within very close walking proximity of somebody who's got the natural gift. You talk about comparison and wandering into somebody's house on a random Wednesday at 2:00, and everything just looks like they've polished it for House Beautiful to show up. And then I would slog back to my house and, struggle to get the door open with all the 1 million children and all of their stuff. So when I saw that one of your proprietary things is what you call your container system, in my head, I got to be honest, Dana, I was somebody who would go buy 274 containers, because containers were going to finally break me through and let me be able to manage this mega size household that I have. But you mean something different by that. You're not talking about just more and more and more containers. So break that down for me,
right?
What your container theory, your container practice is all about.
I call it the container concept.
Oh, I like that.
Right, because it's not a system. It is truly the actual understanding of the purpose of a container, which is the number one communication breakdown between the naturally organized person and the person who struggles with clutter inherently.
Interesting. Okay.
So I also would get the urge to get organized and assume that containers were the answer. And I would go buy a bunch of containers and I would bring them home. And my space never looked like the pictures in the advertisement for the containers, or like my friend's house. So here's my little story that I tell. Totally hypothetical, right? Just pretend. So let's say I was at my friend's house and she had a beautifully organized craft shelf. And the kids were like, all of our kids together were doing all these crafty things and having such a great time. And I would be like, what's the difference between her beautifully organized craft shelf and my craft closet that we're scared to open because if we open the door, everything falls out, right? Like, what's the difference here? And I would see that she had a red bucket for her crayons. And I would think, that's the difference. I need a red bucket. Right. And so I would go out and I'd be like, hey, where'd you get that red bucket? And I would get the exact same red bucket, bring it into my house, fill it with crayons, and I still had 700 crayons left. And my reaction to that was, oh, why is this so hard for me and it's so easy for her? This never seems to work for me the way that it does for other people. So I did the thing that it was most obviously logical to do, and that was buy 2 more red buckets.
Of course.
Right.
That's where my brain would go. Yeah.
Exactly. So I bring in now I had 3 red buckets. I would fill them with crayons. They were teetering, like barely could fit them in there. And I would go to put the red buckets on the shelf, and the red buckets wouldn't fit on the shelf. And so I would again lament, why is this so hard for me when it seems to be easy for other people? And I would go and I would buy another shelf, because that was the obvious thing to do. And then at some point, there wasn't room for more shelves. And I would think, why is this so hard? I am doomed to be disorganized forever. Obviously, I need a bigger house, and we can't afford a bigger house. So it just felt like there was no solution, right?
Right.
So I had this moment as I was talking to myself while I was decluttering and writing about it on this blog, right? And I was talking to myself and saying the word container, and I realized, oh, inside of the word container is the word contain, as in firefighters work to contain a fire. They create a boundary, and as long as they can keep the fire inside of that boundary, it can stay under control. But if it goes outside the boundary, bad things happen. And I realized that a container's purpose is not to hold things. A container's purpose is to serve as a boundary, to be a limit, a natural limit. And when I changed how I viewed the container and used the container, everything changed, because then I have a red bucket and I have 1,000 crayons over here, and I pick my favorite crayons and put them into the bucket first, which is so much less painful than what I had done before, which is like, which crayons am I going to get rid of? Instead, I'm putting my favorite ones in there first. And when it's full, something happens in my brain where I realize, oh, I don't actually need 1,000 crayons. But I didn't have to start with that. Instead, I just say, this is the space that I have, and I put the best things in there first, and I let it make the hard decision about how much of something I can keep. So I don't have to make value decisions. I don't pick up every single item and say, is this a good crayon? Because if that's the question, the answer is yes.
They're all good
If
crayons. Yeah.
yes, like broken crayons still color,
That's
right? Like
right.
I believe that. And so I was putting so much emotional energy into deciding the value or trying to convince myself that something didn't have value when I truly believed it did have value, all these things. And instead, I get to let the container make those hard decisions. And I'm like, okay, the realities of the space are the realities of space. So I realized the red bucket is a container. The shelf is also a container. It's a limited space. And if I try to keep more red buckets than I can actually functionally use there, it's never going to be under control. And my house is a container. And the most important thing in the container is the people who live in it. And we need to be able to function and move and do the things that we need to do without bumping into things and having to move things. And so it just shifted how I saw everything. And it took so much of the pressure of decluttering off. And the reason it works so great with kids is that I'm the mom and I say, hey, this is the container. This is the shelf. This is the bucket. This is the whatever. Put your favorite things in first. And that's fun,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like that's a fun exercise. And then if the container is full, which it's amazing how many times it doesn't even get full, just that natural sorting out of knowing that space is limited, it just naturally sorts out what's worth being in the container and taking space and what's not. But even when it does, I as the mom get to say, oh yeah, it's full. So
Yeah.
the things that don't fit, we need to give those to another kid. It's not me saying that item's bad, that item's bad. I'm not asking, why do you want this? They don't have to, it's just literally the container. It's outside of me. And so, I really look back and I think if I was not writing about this at the time that it was happening, I probably would have thought, I bet you everybody knows this. And I wouldn't have shared it. But because I wasn't teaching anything at the time, I was just being like writing about what I was figuring out. So many people said, what? Like that changes everything for me too. And so that's when I realized, oh, this is that communication piece that's missing between naturally organized people and people who struggle.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. Right. I think that's so incredible to think about, that you were really sharing the learning you were receiving real time and seeing the feedback and seeing that it was connecting and catching gear with people. Because I would have felt the same way. Like, well, I mean, everybody else seems to be able to figure this out. I'm the only one who can't seem to. Why would anybody want to read this? But those people, that audience, it was truly there. The other thing that I struggled with in terms of the way I was viewing containers, I love, this is such a revolutionary way to think of containers, but I kept creating systems that, I could get all the stuff. I was very good at Tetris, Dana. I could get it all slotted in, but it wasn't a maintainable system unless I was the one always doing it. It wasn't always a maintainable system for my children. I was very good at gathering up all the collections of all the things, but the teetering towers that I would build in the aftermath of that, once all the Barbie shoes were sorted out from the, action figures, from the whatever. So how did you begin to instill? I love this first step with your kids, saying, put your favorite ones in the container. The container becomes the enforcer, not you.
Yes.
What did you do to be intentional, though, that whatever systems that you were creating, and I know systems isn't exactly the word, but how did you make it so that your kids would be able to ultimately maintain that? Because that was a step I kept missing. I would do all the restacking and all of the this and all the things, and I wasn't doing enough decluttering in the process, very likely. But I just would be so frustrated because I would do the thing, I'd put in the labor, but then I was the only person who seemed to be able to really make everything go back where I had it.
The container first is something that can't be argued against, right? Like it's finite, it's a physical thing. So always start with decluttering to the container first. But the other thing that I realized was I was brought up by my mother, who has the mentality, because she grew up on a farm 30 minutes from town, that you need to go ahead and have everything you could ever need.
Yeah.
Especially if you can get it for cheaper than you would have to pay if you needed it at the last minute, like go ahead and have it. So I had that mentality growing up. But as I decluttered in my house, I realized that with everything that left my house was a little bit easier to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that I have a clutter threshold. I reached a point where I had decluttered enough that I suddenly looked around and realized, oh, I can do this. Like, I can handle this. And that's when I saw that we each have a clutter threshold. We each have a point at which this is the level of stuff that I personally can maintain. And it's different. My mom's is different from mine. My best friend's is different from mine. This is the reason why I can have the exact same stuff as someone else. Mine looks like a thrift store and hers looks like a magazine. Like this is the difference, right? And so the declutter to the container first. And then if it is still hard to maintain, there's just too much. And so declutter some more. See if it's maintainable. Declutter some more. I define the maintainable, like the way to measure that is with a 5-minute pickup. Is a 5-minute pickup enough on a regular day to get this space under control with whoever's using it, with whatever age the kids are at, whatever stage they're in, how busy they are, whatever? That is how to measure whether or not you are under your clutter threshold. So a 5-minute pickup with the kids in the playroom or their bedroom or wherever toys are stored, you know, is a great way to get them involved, but it's also a way to say, okay, well, if we can't do this in 5 minutes, then we've got too much stuff and we need to get rid of some, which is both motivating for them to do the picking up, but it's also helping them accept that, you know what, I can't just because I like something doesn't mean it deserves space in my home. I have to be able to maintain it and handle
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. It's actually another container concept, right? The 5-minute pickup. I think that's really amazing because I was so guilty of letting things spin out to a point that then we were talking about a
Yes.
multi-hour or
Yes.
multi-day over a week trying to clear out kind of a thing. And that is so overwhelming, particularly for my kids whose brains might be wired a little bit more
Mhm.
like mine. So one of the things that I have found very interesting across all the personalities at my house is I have kids who would very easily let things go. Like it just because I, like you, was raised, the child of a boomer who had been raised by someone who came into adulthood, during World War II. I mean, like, so,
Yeah.
keep
Yes.
every little sliver of string and make sure you keep all the baby food jars and, just all of the stuff. And the thing that's been interesting in watching the personalities in my house is the ones who have come already pre-wired with the ability to simply let things kind of flow through their hands, and the ones who want all the stuff, all the things, all the time, even though it's not necessarily from that perspective of what you and I were raised in.
Right.
So how do you work with the individual personalities in your own home where, yeah, you may have somebody who truly, it's a much more emotional process. It is more sentimental for them, whatever the thing is with them, while also, saying, okay, not doing that comparative thing. Like, well, your sister
Right.
can let go of whatever. Why do you need to hang on to, 247 Barbies that you haven't cracked the box open in 4 years?
Yeah.
Like, what's that about?
Right. So there's a lot there. The first thing to realize is that shared spaces need to be decluttered down to the clutter threshold of the lowest clutter threshold, right? Like I have a low clutter threshold. I can't handle as much stuff.
Right.
So shared spaces need to have less stuff. Individual spaces can be tailored for individual clutter thresholds, okay? But the container is the one that decides whether you can have 5 Barbies or 247 Barbies, right? Like there's wanting actually is completely irrelevant. It only comes down to the space that you have. And so giving each kid that, some are going to be able to have more stuff in that space and be able to maintain it with 5-minute pickups. And some are not going to be able. So we use both of those things. Does that make sense?
Right.
Use the container to keep it from being 247 Barbies. You get to pick your very favorites. Those are the ones that deserve space, but the container is going to decide that. And then going forward, we do the 5-minute pickups. And that is what determines, even though technically you can fit those in there, some of us don't have that personality to neatly Tetris things in there. Some do. So the person who has the Tetris personality is able to keep more things if they're able to keep that under control. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you handled with kids in the home things like Christmases and holidays and on and on and on? I still have, I mean, they're young, they're definitely in those young adult years, but I still have 3 kids still here living at the house. We've got 5 that have launched. But one of the things that I'm watching, I'm observing is both in that role of being a grandparent, wanting to get grandkids all kinds of great stuff. And then remembering sometimes when my kids' grandparents would show up and I'd think, where on earth am I going to put that? Now I'm going to have to manage that. But even in parenting, I got to be honest, I want the big Christmas. I want the big celebration, whatever. And a lot of times that means stuff. How have you managed that in your own household with where your clutter threshold is at, allowing a grandparent to be who they are and to show up with the big whatever, or do you try to stem that? I mean, what is your approach to all that right now?
You can absolutely try to stem it, but I definitely am super passionate about viewing gifts as the love that they are, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so because I think it's so easy to want to put these boundaries on that and say absolutely not, what, like, that's, I don't find that to be loving and effective, right? So instead, it sometimes takes a little more time, but to practice the one in, one out. Now, I used to not, before I understood the container concept, I would hear people say one in, one out, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I was picturing bringing one item in, like a new pair of socks in, and swapping it out for one pair of socks in my sock drawer. And I was like, what difference would that make? My sock drawer won't close anyway, right? Like, that was, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But once I realized, oh, the sock drawer is the size that it is, and it's a container for the socks. And if I try to keep more socks, then it can't be under control. And I decluttered down to that point. Then I saw the one in, one out world for what it is, which is how you maintain any decluttering progress that you make. So as new things come in, they have to deserve space more than the things that already exist. So it becomes a one in, like, okay, we need a place for this. We're going with space as opposed to, do you like it? We don't ask questions about, do you like it? Will you use it? Will you ever play with it? Those are irrelevant questions because that's where our brains can spin out, right?
Right,
So it's
right.
just, okay, this is this new thing. Where would you look for it first? We go to that space. If there's no room there, okay, what are you willing to get rid of in order to make the room for this? And here's where it gets hard is sometimes kids are like, no, that thing right there, that in my mind is old and not great and not as good as this new thing, but they would rather keep that than this new thing. I'm a really big believer in getting rid of new things. I mean, like let the space decide. The kid gets to fill the container that we determine, but they get to fill the container with what's important to them, but that container is the limit. And so that process can be a little like, I just paid money for that,
Yeah.
or I grandma just paid money for that, or
Yeah.
whatever, and they would really rather keep this. But that's also how we and grandma are going to learn. And we get to blame the container. Oh man, that was so nice, but she didn't have the space for it, and she decided that she wanted to keep this instead of this.
Yeah.
It's not going to be comfortable, but people do learn.
Yeah.
I
No.
mean, you know,
Right.
over time, as opposed to having that fight over don't bring new things in and whatever. It's let the space help you know what should stay and what should go.
Right. I love that. I think that's such great wisdom. So tell the listener about this new project that you've been working on, which is a children's book that's going to help
Yes.
in some of this container concept world. Tell me about it.
Well, it's so I've written a lot of books at this point, but this is my favorite book project so far.
Oh, I
It's
love
been
it.
so fun. Yeah, so it's called Winnie's Pile of Pillows, and Winnie is a walrus, and she learns that she loves pillows. And then suddenly she gets all these different opportunities to bring more pillows in. And people are like, you love pillows? Here's some pillows, you know? So it ends up that she brings in these things that she absolutely loves, but then they take over her room and she no longer can use her room and she no longer can enjoy the things she loves about her room because everything is covered in pillows. And so she realizes that she can only have the ones that have a real place to go, and so then she lets the others go. So it's really an introduction to the container concept. My love for this story is that I want it to be, my goal is that it is a bridge in that you know crosses that communication gap between parents and their kids, because that's one of the struggles when you help your kid declutter, is that I want them to be them, the things that make their eyes light up, and yet not have those things take over and make their room a place that nobody enjoys. You know,
Right,
like
right.
how do you put a limit on this? Well, that's the conversation that this opens up. So
I love that. Well, Dana, I just could keep you on and keep chatting because
this
your
is fun.
wisdom, your insight, and your unique way of looking at this, I think is so powerful. I want the listener to go check out all your stuff in the new book. Where can they go to find you on social media and all your great other books and this new children's book? Where do they go?
Well, anytime wherever you want to search, you can just search Dana K. White. You have to put K in there because there's a Dana White that's a man, and that's not me. But you can do that. You can go to A Slob Comes Clean. That's my website that I started back in 2009. A slobcomesclean.com/Winnie will give you a opportunity to put in your order information, and you can get a kid-friendly Winnie focused version of a printable of my 5-step no mess decluttering process that works really well with children and me. But yeah,
That's awesome. Well, Dana, thank you so much for being on today. We've got to get you back on because I just know that this is going
anytime.
to be one of those episodes that really hits for people. So thank you
Love it.
again.
Thanks.
All right, friend, you know the drill. We go to show notes because show notes are where we have all the links and great things from this episode today. Rebecca and the team put that together for you every week, so be sure and go check that out. AllMomDoes.com, AllMomDoes on the socials. That's where your community is for women who are in the same seasons and stages of life, asking many of the same questions, supporting each other, encouraging each other. I want you to go there. And I love to hang out with you too. Julie Lyles Carr, usually on Instagram is where you're going to find me. Hey, go ahead. Slide into my DMs. I dare you. Leave me some questions. Leave me some guests that you'd love to see on the show because that is what we're all about. And I will see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.